Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this panel. I'm excited to get us started. Welcome to our existing Logic subscribers, new readers, and for the folks who haven't yet subscribed, my job is to convince you to do so by the end of this panel. Subscribing to the Logic gives you access to not only events like this, which are open to the public, but also subscriber exclusive events, and of course, all of the coverage that my amazing colleagues and also me sometimes put out on a daily basis. I want to thank IBM Canada for sponsoring this event today. In a report published last month, IBM found that just 8% of banks were systematically developing generative AI, while 78% had a more tactical approach. It also identified opportunities for operational efficiencies, better advisory services, and other tasks that could be accomplished with AI. And we're here to talk today about generative AI in banking. So I'd like to start by welcoming Mark Jarvis of IBM to give some opening remarks.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to open the panel here. I'm certainly really excited to hear from our panelists today and their perspective on deploying generative AI within the banking financial services industry. IBM has a long history associated with generative AI. We've done decades of pure research. We've developed our own open source language models focused on enterprises, and we have a large consultancy helping clients across the world every day with general business problems, including deploying generative AI into their organizations. And from those discussions, I think the question in front of us is not so much innovating with generative AI, because as you pointed out, there's a lot of tactical activity happening, but how do we scale generative AI so that it becomes a part of the fabric of an organization and is consumed just like workflow, structured analytics, and all the tools that we have available to us today to drive business outcomes. Based on this, if there's a lot of factors to consider as we look to try and scale generative AI, but I'll touch on a couple just in the opening comments that we see a lot of questions and dialogue on when we talk to our clients. The first is from a technology perspective. The rate and pace of change of generative AI is phenomenally large and fast. There's always a new generative AI model coming out, either from different organizations like AHEA, IBM, OpenAI, and the like. And then the versions of those things change very, very rapidly. So the question, one of the important things for us to consider as we deploy these things is how do you actually abstract or take the models away from the business outcome so that you can change the models as and when required without actually creating a significant tech debt or some complexity in deploying or affecting the business outcome that those models are generating. The second piece from that as well, of course, is when do you change the models? Because these things often come out every week. So it's important for organizations to establish some criteria or standards or benchmarks so that they can make conscious decisions on changing the model when a new model comes out that improves their specific outcomes and requirements. A general benchmark might say, a certain model's 5% faster than another or whatever, but that may not be specifically relevant to the specific use case or the way that an organization is deploying those things. So that's one thing to consider. The second piece I would sort of say we get a lot of questions on is around governance. And so top-down governance within an organization to make sure that we drive a consistent and standardized outcome. If we reflect back on when SaaS was deployed, every user with a credit card suddenly had a Salesforce or a similar deployment, and that created a lot of complexity within the organization. And so I think learning from the lessons of those, having some standards and governance around to make sure that these things are deployed in a controlled fashion is really important. And the other question that we get a lot is when to deploy the models. So when do you actually use them out at scale? Now, that's of course something that every organization will have to work out for themselves. But the point will be, I think, the observation that we make is if we can benchmark it so that the model is better than a human, And so that we have controls within an organization today to actually make sure that we catch the issues and errors associated with human activities, that we would suggest that when a model become equal to or better than a human is when you should start considering deploying these things at scale. I think I'll just close on one point. Final point to make is that none of us are alone in this journey, and so this area is moving really quickly. Organizations like the Logic and these events allow us to share our experiences, and there's a lot of organizations like IBM that are talking to clients every day to actually assist organizations on the journey as well. So with that, I'll hand back to you, Murad, and I really look forward to the panel. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mark. So just one note as we go into this, IBM is the sponsor for this event, and we're grateful for their support. But the Logic maintains strict editorial independence. We sort of put together the cast for this event ourselves, and I'm the one coming up with the questions and setting the agenda. So, blame or thank me, depending on how you feel about it. Actually, that is 90% true. We do actually want to hear your questions as well. So what I'd ask you to do is, don't wait until the end. Start dropping your questions into the field there, and we'll try and work them in as we go. So let me do a little bit of tap dancing to start. Mark was already talking there a little bit about the sort of explosion we've seen in generative AI, new models coming out every week. Certainly, those of you that are subscribers will know that there's no shortage of things happening here between new models, new applications, new players getting into the game. There's a lot going on in generative AI right now. In my conversations with companies that actually sell AI products, whether that's models or applications, a lot of them are actually particularly keen on regulated industries because generally companies in those industries have a lot of pretty orderly data, robust tech practices. They're better placed to adopt new technologies than perhaps industries that don't have to follow the same set of rules. But regulation also means limits on what banks can do with AI and a different risk profile as they're doing it. All that is to say that in this field, it's some of the longer standing and larger names that are actually doing a lot of the innovating and adopting. So with all of that ado, I want to welcome our panelists who you're here to hear from today. So Dr. Foteini Agrafioti is Senior Vice President for Data and AI and Chief Science Officer at RBC. Julien Crowe is Senior Director of Artificial Intelligence at the National Bank of Canada. And Ozge Yeloglu is Vice President of Enterprise Advanced Analytics and Artificial Intelligence at CIBC. Those are some bold-faced names, and we've got some amazing panelists for you today. So let's get started. Thank you, folks, all so much for being here with us. I want to start our discussion close to home and sort of ground it in concrete stuff as quickly as possible, because I think, there's so much flying around about models and what this technology can do. It's useful to have some examples to hold on to. So I'd like to hear of an example of a generative AI tool that's been deployed for internal use by the employees of your bank. Maybe we'll start with Foteini.
Hello, wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me. Very exciting topic, obviously. We spent quite a bit of time talking about Gen AI and how we use it and where we draw the lines around it. In many ways, it's the best time to be a scientist in the bank. We've been doing AI for a long time, and I feel Gen AI has brought renewed interest and attention and interest for investment too, which is wonderful to see. So we're very excited about the overall potential for applying Gen AI in our businesses, and that's a true statement across all of our businesses. When we started our journey with generative AI, we led with, like we do with everything else that is an emerging technology. We got each other around the table, kind of like talked about our risk appetite. And we started very quickly drawing lines around what we want to do upfront as we test and learn, and what are maybe our no-go zones. And so where we've been successfully using Gen AI so far is largely in the back office. It's in support of our advisors in real-time client interactions. We've deployed Gen AI technology in our contact centers so that as our clients call in, they're looking for very specific answers to questions about their finances. We can easily navigate complex documents, policies, and procedures, and like get to that answer as quickly as possible. It's also technology that helps us very efficiently do some of the housekeeping that happens after a call wraps up, where you have to summarize it and document that interaction so that you have that registered, or perhaps there's more follow-up action to happen later on. These are things that take a good chunk of our time. They're very important. And Gen AI technology can very easily support these interactions. I would say one of the reasons why we focused so much in the advice center, it's naturally a very language-rich environment, but it also had that opportunity for us to use it for supporting our client interactions, but under human oversight. And that was a very critical point. Another area where we've been quite successful in is within our global markets business, in using Gen AI in support of research and market research and preparation of reports, quick questions and answers of company annual reports, quarterly reports, notes. These are tasks that are quite mundane, for like finding information efficiently so you can cover the stocks you cover every day is another very good way of using this technology to kind of like streamline that workflow.
I should ask if I can borrow that. Would certainly make my life easier. Julien, what about at National? Where are you seeing success with Gen AI internally?
Yes, thank you so much for having me here, Murad. It's a pleasure to be here. Foteini talked about back office use cases, right? And I think this is what we're seeing at National Bank as well. I would say we have three kind of big categories of use cases where we've seen that Gen AI actually brings an impact, and this is measurable. And you've asked for an example. So one example of this is in branches. So you said it, Murad, we have a regulated industry, right? And so we have staff in branches, advisors that sometimes have to deal with relatively complex products or processes. Think about underwriting a mortgage, for instance. And sometimes these people will have questions or will need some support to be able to go through the whole process, provide the product, provide the sales, and so on. So today what we have is a call center internally that is there with high-level experts to support all our branches. And what we're currently doing is deploying Gen AI capabilities directly in branches so that our advisors in branches have the support needed when they ask these kind of questions to get answers from the chatbot system directly. So little by little, we're bringing more automation, more integration with workflows in these technologies, reducing the pressure on our internal call center and allowing our internal call center to increase the focus on complex problem resolution, and everything that is more simple or straightforward provide more autonomy to our sales force to manage it independently.
Yeah, and I think we're going to talk a little later down the line about kind of the types of things that generative AI is good for right now, and the types of things maybe that companies are hoping they'll be better for down the line. But Ozge, what about at your shop? What are you using Gen AI for internally these days?
Thanks, Murad. We would like to believe that we're all different, but I mean, what I'm hearing is we're all doing the same thing. So I would hate to repeat everything Foteini and Julien said. So I say yes, 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 yes to everything. Yes, we're doing all of those things as well. And maybe two things that they have left out, and I am confident that they're doing these things too as well, is one, software developer productivity. There's absolutely usage there. And then two, just overall, like we all have our own versions of ChatGPT, right? I am confident every large enterprise today has built their version of ChatGPT. So we do have that as well. We call it CAI, as CIBC AI. And we have been piloting that for a large user base in the last few months, like thousands of people like pilot. And more news coming on that, but that is very much of a general purpose productivity tool that you would find in many large enterprises.
Yeah, and I think one thing we're going to get to a little later on is, the things that are sort of useful to you as large organizations, large enterprises, and the things that might be particularly useful to you as banks or financial services organizations. But I do want to ask a question about something that came up, maybe to break the fourth wall a little bit. But when you do one of these things, you talk to everyone beforehand, have a little bit of a chat, and certainly I've been doing a fair bit of reporting on the space. One thing that strikes me is that all of these internal use cases notwithstanding, we're not yet seeing large enterprises in general, but certainly financial services organizations putting out a lot of generative AI tools that are customer facing, where the customer is interacting with a generative AI model or application in some way. Julien, why is that?
So I think that as financial institutions, our clients expect us to manage risk soundly, right? And in this regard, generative AI is a very good technology with a lot of potential, but I would say that it's still a technology that does have some limitations. And our wish, at least at National Bank, is to wait until we have a sufficiently good understanding and mastering of the technology before we bring it to clients. Now, one of the challenges we face with deploying something like Gen AI to clients is that if I'm looking at an internal use case, say that Gen AI doesn't bring perfection, but has some level of mistakes or imperfection in its answers, I can actually provide coaching, training in a relatively quick amount of time to my colleague employees so that they learn how to use the solution, when to use it, and when to actually perhaps challenge it or make validations, right? This is something that is much more delicate to do with clients because clients, of course, will expect to have a seamless experience. So we are waiting until we bring the technology at a level where this can be more seamless until we deploy it to clients. And, I do believe this is what clients are expecting out of us as well.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting question there about, public awareness of the limitations of these models and these systems and how they interact with them. Ozge, you also, you didn't identify anything public facing. Is there, what are the limitations that kind of give you pause here?
Limitation is very much around the trust, right? I think it's still what Julien mentioned too. Like for us, that would be the main thing as well. Like, do we have enough trust in the technology that we're not going to break the trust between our bank and our clients, right? Because to us, the most important thing with our relationship with our banks, with our clients, is the trust. And if as an end user, as a client, I might not really care about a chatbot giving me a wrong answer with my Amazon delivery or whatever it is, versus my bank giving me a wrong answer through this kind of channel when there's no human control in place, right? So there's probably a little bit of that piece, and I don't think it's the never kind of answer. It will happen. It's just like we just need to go through that process, and we just need to make sure that we're putting, even if the technology might not be 100% trustworthy at some point, we might need to find out the right guardrails that we put around the technology and the solution, that it is good enough to be able to serve our clients with that technology.
Yeah, Foteini, you and I have talked in the past about other forms of AI, non-generative forms of AI that RBC has used that at least impact customer journeys, or customer actions, like around trading, for example, with reinforcement learning. Aiden, am I remembering that right? Is the name of the system? How are you differentiating? How are you thinking about this question of generative AI and customers relative to your experience with other forms of AI and customers?
We're client-faced with AI 100% in many sides of our business. From everything we're from trading to AI that helps you save money through our NOMI applications and our retail bank. But these were AIs that have been quite established. Our risk frameworks and practices are very robust. We understand the risks. We know how to manage those risks. We know when to make decisions around trading models that are more explainable for areas where our explainability would be required. So traditional AI, and sometimes I can't even believe myself I use this term, is something that is quite managed well across all financial institutions, and to the extent that we're absolutely client-faced with it. Generative AI is a different beast, and it is the risk, but it's not just that. It's we don't have definitive views yet that our clients want to be served that way. That our clients don't want to talk to the human on the other side. I genuinely feel that that's what we hear from most of our clients. Like, there's certain types of conversations that you probably don't want to have with a bot, even if you were to get all the time the correct answer. And we're very respectful of that. Like, it's not just risk. It's just, is society ready to talk to and get financial advice from a non-human? But certainly the risk is a factor there. The good thing, I think, here is that we're not waiting in line for Gen AI to become safe enough for us to use it. I think what I like hearing about the other panelists here as well is that everyone's marching towards that. We are adopting a very graduated approach. That's what banks have always done. But we're not waiting for that to be done. It's like the financial sector usually is the last to benefit from technological innovation. No one in science wakes up in the morning and says, "Oh, let me write this transaction model." No, they build models on science, on pictures and images and language and like data that are non-financial data. And so as much as we love using large language models in our everyday lives, and we play with them at home, work, it doesn't really matter that the GPT can write in Shakespeare. Like, who cares that it can do that? What we really needed to do is be very accurate in answering about financial health. And that's where we need to solve for. We definitely don't wait in line until someone builds that. We're making the investments to lead these domains.
Yeah, I think that this gets to a theme that, if you, I'm sure all of you come across a lot, and certainly people who pay attention to this space. It's amazing how much time you spend talking about humans in the context of generative AI. And I want to ask about that internally. Julien mentioned this, but a little bit earlier. But I want to start with Ozge here, because you were telling me you have change management under your purview. That's an actual thing that you're thinking about, you have a team working on. How are all of your organizations, starting with you, Ozge, how are you thinking about getting employees ready to use this technology and making sure that they are comfortable with it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So this is a very, very new function that I'm actually hiring a lead for right now. So I can't even say the team is in place. But the high-level plans are in place. I can tell you that. I just need the person to come in, or the team come in and start executing. Look, and the need for that is like what we have realized, especially when we start building not one-off tools or specific line of specific tools, but enterprise-wide tools. How do we make sure the adoption is there? Right? And it goes back to your question about like, how are we going to make sure that our team members are comfortable using these tools and so on. And we have, well, being the data-driven team ourselves, like when we launch these enterprise tools, we actually look at the data and how end users are using it, how parts of the user base is struggling with what kind of problems. And then what we started doing a little bit ad hoc in the beginning is during this pilot is running specific sessions on whether it's prompting, whether it's like whatever that blocker for our team members to not use these tools. We started putting these things a little bit one-off or ad hoc, let's say with our HR partners, but then realizing that, okay, we really need to, this is not going away, right? AI, Gen AI, whatever flavor of intelligence that we will see in the next few years or decade is not going away. It will only continue to come more towards us. With that reason, we decided that having an AI change management focus would be very, very valuable. So instead of doing these things project-based and so on, can we have a more holistic view on how we will engage with our team members, how they will engage with all of these tools that we're creating, and future-proofing our team members as well, upskilling, reskilling when needed, and all that.
Yeah, Julien, you were talking about a little bit on the other end of the scale. Like once these are in place and they're using them, how do they know how to handle them? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, what does your training and education look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what Ozge mentioned is a good idea, right? To have actually a group that's dedicated to managing change management. What we've seen with Gen AI is that it's not only a new technology that you're implementing in your organization, it's literally transforming the way you work. I've had some colleagues start talking about asking AI first before asking another colleague, right? That's a whole type of reflex in how you work that you got to change. So in our cases, we're actually starting to organize some innovation days where we have colleagues from all over the organization that are coming, that are sharing ideas, that are not just listening to expert telling them how to use Gen AI, but that are also benefit from the sharing from other colleagues that are in the process of learning just like them. A little bit the same way that if you're learning a language, it's usually better to speak with someone who's at the same level as you than with someone who's a pro at the language. We're kind of trying to bring the same logic here. We are bringing, of course, all the usual access to a large volume of video online training. But what we see really is that because it's so much about changing how you work, it's a lot about the community impact at the bank of who has a good idea and how can your colleagues replicate what you did. And that's really a lot of kind of workshopping, right? Sitting down together, learning together. And this is a lot of what we're doing right now, and it's working pretty well this far.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I want to change the tack a little because Foteini, you were already talking about sort of how you set up here. How you got started in this space. So we have this audience question from Carol Wilder, and this is the thing I'm sort of fascinated about generally. So she asks, how do you measure generative AI success? And I'll modify this a little to ask, like, are there metrics? Are there methods of measuring returns? What are you looking for to prove that this stuff is useful to you at all?
For me, I think, look, there is the side of Gen AI that has to do with efficiency, and then there's a ton that have to do with a more direct tie to the bottom line. I think usually the question is around the efficiency. Say I use Gen AI to help me write emails. I save back so much time. Then how do I capitalize on that? And I think this is something that the industry hasn't completely cracked yet for the general employee. However, there are some very well controlled environments where There's direct ties to value, to time. And the advice center, our contact centers, is a great example of that, right? Like what we measure there is call handling time and client satisfaction. So if we can reduce our call handling time and increase satisfaction, we're very, very clear, like financially, what this means for us, and that's what we measure. So we lead with these KPIs. We in the back office around use cases discussed here on helping you prepare your reports and your market research, all that. So you can measure your coverage of stocks per day using that technology. So if you're able to cover X amount more stocks because you had that technology without hiring a lot more people, but you just made one person more productive, then that's a very good proxy to efficiency as well. And that has absolute NI impact. There's that's clear. And then there's a whole long tail of usage of Gen AI, for which I think there's a lot of ambiguity today about whether time measurements are as effective right now.
Before I ask the others, let me just put you on the spot there. So you identified two things: one in call center around call handling times and customer satisfaction, and coverage on your trading desk. Are those metrics currently looking positive?
Yes.
Oh,
But
well,
I will let our CEO give the exact answer on that. And this is, yes, no, not only do they look positive, these are areas that we're investing further in. And like this is where you know whether an enterprise is mature or not around AI, because AI is exciting. You can be in this space of use cases and the nice to have for a long time before you start driving real value. When we have financial targets on AI, like we're very specific about the incremental benefit we get through the use of AI. And so, yes, like talking about change management, these are business led. These are strategically organized. These are CEO agendas, and that's how you derive these financial benefits. And then you know where do we invest more and where to say, well, yeah, this is more of a nice to have, perhaps not as much of a priority.
Right. Ozge, what about at CIBC? What are you measuring and how are those numbers looking?
It's very similar, honestly, very similar. So I'm not going to repeat everything that Foteini mentioned there, but what my maybe advice for anyone in the audience is like to be able to find those more measurable and more impactful use cases. Really think this is the question that I ask to our business partners, to Foteini's point, like there's enough interest now that we have to prioritize things, right? And to be able to prioritize, you go back to value. What's the value that we're generating for our business here? And this simple example that I asked to our business partners, I challenged them with this is, so you're telling me that, and I heard this at a conference a few months back. I can't remember who said it, but you're telling me that you used to, or your team members used to do their jobs with 10 fingers. And if I give you this technology, they're going to use their 8 fingers. What's happening with these 2 fingers? We have no intentions of chopping off these 2 fingers, right? I would like to keep them if possible. But what is really the real value? And then the moment we put the question that way, then they start thinking, well, okay, I see where you're going with this, to exactly to Foteini's point. Now these 2 fingers, can they go sell more? Can they go find more customers more? Can they do, what is it that more that they can do that will actually create a measurable business value for us, right? I find those examples are harder to find, obviously, but they are a lot more impactful and they're a lot more exciting, and then valuable as well, right? And that's really the focus that we have here.
Yeah. So Julien, I want to ask you an audience question on this topic because I think it's interesting here. So Ruhidhar asks, how is AI transforming productivity specifically in banking? And we've kind of been talking about that, but you've got branch employees using this. I wonder what you're seeing in terms of productivity and where you see possible efficiency gains going forward.
So I think this is kind of a good segue to the previous question, right? That Foteini and Ozge answered spot on. I do think that there's a lot of back office work. If you look at call centers, if you look at IT development activities, if you look at the sales force, the advisors, and reducing their the workload in administrative work so that they can spend more time building client relationship, advising clients, which is their key role, right? That's what they're here to do. I think we are seeing today the start of an impact that I think will grow pretty massively through time. Foteini mentioned that yes, the impact was positive, right? This is what we're seeing at the bank as well, and there are productivity gains today. Yes, for our branch agents. Yes, for our call center agents, there are productivity gains today for our IT teams, whether it's for development activities, whether it's for technical documentation or testing automation. There's productivity gains there. There's also productivity gains with very, very simple things, right? Such as automating, writing this, just documenting the summary of a conversation for wealth advisors, and just being able to save those 10-15 minutes and spend it investing in developing a relationship with clients. I mean, you bring this at scale, this has huge potential for productivity. So we're seeing something today. Right. I think it's rather small today. I'm expecting it to grow pretty intensively through time.
Okay, I want to switch tack a little bit and talk about the technology itself. So, Julien, I'll stick with you. What models are you using right now? Names, please. And what are you building versus buying?
Okay. All right. So I'll start with the first question because, and this is something that I think Mark mentioned at the opening, the market is moving so fast. I do not feel I have the predictive capabilities to know which solution or which algorithm will be the best in a week, in 6 months, in a year. I do not have this capacity, right? So the strategy that I put in place at the bank was really to deliver very decoupled architectures, so we could quickly move and redeploy new models as the market would just evolve. So today we're going to use OpenAI models. We're going to use Anthropic Claude models as well. These are the two that are the most widely deployed at the bank. But we're always looking at new models from these providers, models from other providers, including Canadian providers, and we're constantly every couple of weeks or so doing benchmarking to see if what we're using today at the bank is still what we should be using tomorrow, right? So this is what we do today and what we're using.
Yeah, so Foteini, I want to come to you next because I think RBC has a sort of interesting position in this landscape in that, it's been well publicized and we reported it that you've tied up with Cohere, or Cohere has tied up with you to build this North for banking. So Cohere is one of those Canadian providers that Julien was referencing. They are a Toronto-based company. They have a platform called North, which combines their large language models and allows some development on top of them. Explain to us why you decided to form this partnership and what it actually means for RBC.
Yeah, and completely appreciate how Julien is thinking about this. And the market is generally shifting constantly, and it's not mature yet. But we went at it a little different. For us, architectural convergence was important because we go we go quickly to scale at this point in our journey, and the governance around these things was very important from a get-go. And so that doesn't mean we are only users of one Gen AI model provider, but it's all a converged architecture. So our developers, our employees understand the patterns of use, and they're well governed on what they're allowed to do with what for what kind of use case. The kinds of like the design and the backdrop. So Cohere has been, it's a partnership that we're very excited about for so many reasons. The first that I will say off the bat is we have this Canadian company that really established the scene for Gen AI in Canada. Have done really well. Models are performing, and we're, as being a largest Canadian company, I think it was amazing that we got to buy Canadian science through a Canadian startup into a Canadian enterprise, a self-fulfilling cycle. So I was personally very happy for that partnership from that front. But more materially, what it allowed us to do is Cohere is unlike a lot of the Gen AI companies, it's enterprise focused. And there are some others as well, but they are really genuinely doubling down on solving specific needs for enterprises rather than Gen AI for the general consumer. And that helps you right away, not only use these models to solve your needs, but kind of like secure them better and make them more robust, so that, again, you can potentially even climb that ladder towards being client-faced faster, because you constrain these models to solve for the problem space you're interested in, rather than everything under the sun that is human-to-machine communication. It also allowed us to deploy models on-prem. And that was very important to us. We don't run the bank in the cloud. We feel more comfortable, and we've made the investments in our infrastructure. We operate one of Canada's largest privately owned GPUs farms, and we do so within our secure data centers. And so bringing Gen AI technology directly into these data centers were very important for us, because that's where we secure most of our sensitive client data. And we wanted to have Gen AI technology access that, so we can do valuable things with that technology in the bank. But managing privacy around Gen AI when all of these models run off of cloud, not always part of your virtual cloud environment, was challenging and limiting. And the last thing I'd say is that you don't always get to work with a world-class large language model team when you work with a Gen AI provider. And this is where our partnership with Cohere to us was very important. These are scientists working directly with scientists on the RBC side, and we're solving for the next generation of large language models for our domains.
Ozge, I want to ask you one last question here, and then I'll get you all to do a little bit of a wrap up for me, which is to say, maybe bridging off of this, are there, I want to get back to this question of what makes banks different in the Gen AI space. Are there things that you are thinking about right now that with Gen AI applications that are distinct from just being, a very large entity? I mean, we're talking the three companies represented here are some of Canada's largest companies. There are always going to be, as you were saying off the top, use cases around engineering and back office that might generalize. What is special to being a bank with Gen AI?
Oh, I don't know if I have a good answer to that, to be frank, Murad, but it is, I don't know if it's specific or it's more of the larger umbrella of it. Like, one of the things that was a little bit surprising to me when I came from technology to banking was the variety of businesses that we run within one business, right? And it's very, very different. Like how our contact center business works from banking centers versus commercial banking, capital markets, retail banking. and you have your HR, legal, everything in-house, right? So I don't know if I would say it's very specific to banking with one field, but I think having a lot of different functions in one enterprise, I don't know if there are many enterprises functioning like 10 different businesses under one business. And I find more of the value is probably there, like the variety of the problems that we can solve with this technology is probably a lot more than many other enterprises, I would think.
Yeah, and at some point I'm going to have you all back to talk about how all of this works for you in the different distinct markets that you operate in, because that I think would be a fascinating conversation. But for now, that timer's ticking. So I want to ask you each for your sort of best 1 minute, 1 minute sort of forecast. I know forecasting the future of AI in general is a bad idea, and banks don't love the whole prediction thing necessarily, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I'll ask you a simple question, hopefully that won't make this too difficult. So in a minute, what's one thing you expect in Gen AI in the next 18 months that will impact how you use the technology? I'll start with Julien.
Okay. I would say the way I see it, it's all about integration. Today, we've used Gen AI mostly to increase efficiency around communication, take large volume of text, of unstructured data, and synthesize it, making much more easy to digest. I think the next step beyond communication and acting, through the window of a chatbot is actually automating workflows. Getting decisions to be made as automatically as possible behind Gen AI capabilities, using multiple agents, agentics, right? We're more and more talking about this, although there's few production use cases today. So I think Gen AI will continue to grow in the foreseeable future and improve itself the way we know it today. But I see a lot of value for companies like ours in integrating it in a much more smart way and doing what banks do best, right? Which is risk management. How do you leverage Gen AI with all its limitations?
Right.
And integrate it in a process where it still brings a good amount of automation.
Foteini, what's your 1 minute forecast for the next 18 months?
You heard the word risk, trust, I think a million times in the last 30 minutes. I genuinely believe that because banks are interested in this technology is going to be part of the reason why this technology will become safer in the future. It will accelerate because it's the only path that we go to market, right? Like for us, it's not a choice. And not because of the regulators. That's just like table stakes. It's genuinely the relationship you have with the clients. So things that you don't want to do, the risks you don't want to take. I would also actually spend 30 seconds on these models have not been designed to innately understand financial domains. And this is where I think the most exciting upside and uniqueness that banks can bring to this environment is if you ask GPT, what's the financial health of a person? Maybe it can answer something because it saw it written in some of its training documents, but it hasn't really seen statements. It hasn't seen transaction data. It hasn't seen accounts. And so the opportunity to do this cross-modal, multimodal training in these domains so that they can innately understand financial data rather than speak about it generically because they've seen it written in documents is the opportunity here.
Ozge, I'll give you the last word here.
It is really hard to be the last one because all the good things are said. No, I agree. I think it's very exciting. I was actually surprised that we never mentioned the word agentic till the end of this call because that's what you hear everywhere these days. I do believe we're going to find some good use cases for that from the technology perspective, more the agentic approach and how we're integrating with our current systems and processes and workflows and such. Definitely, I agree with the financial domain, and bringing the financial domain into the LLMs is valuable. And look, overall, I think if I add to one more thing is, I truly believe the maturity of how our end users, say in our case, our employees, are actually leveraging these tools. One, from adoption perspective, I do definitely foresee that it's going to become a part of our everyday lives and our workflows and how we use the technology. And two, being able to point out and or be aware of the risks, potential risks, or the shortcomings that this technology will have, I think it will be much more easier to pinpoint by the end user as well.
Well, listen, thank you all so much for this. Time flies when you're having fascinating discussions. I'd like to thank our panelists, Foteini, Julien, and Ozge. Thank you to IBM and Mark Jarvis for sponsoring today's event. Mark did actually post his own little prediction here, which is a move to smaller language models with the company's data embedded in the model and not injected via RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation. Certainly, we're seeing lots of interesting things happening in smaller models. We'll get you back to talk about your models in a year, 18 months, 5 years. I'm sure a lot will have changed. Thank you to the audience for joining us today. If you're not already a subscriber, you can find a link to subscribe in the chat or visit the Logix website. Beyond things like this, you get a lot of content, and trust me, our team has been doing so much recently. It's a busy world we live in. There's more to come, more events to come, so please watch your inbox. The Logix Summit is happening on November 3rd, so please get in touch with Ariel Lepper-Walker on sponsorship opportunities. Thank you again to everyone who joined us today, our panelists, Foteini, Julien, and Ozge, our sponsors, IBM, and the team behind the scenes. Let me just say, this is their second event in 24 hours, because that's what the news cycle does to you sometimes. And our events team handle all of this with grace and competence that I honestly can't believe most of the time. It's amazing. You can find the Logic on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I think we're on Blue Sky now. Most of our reporters are on the public-facing platforms too. Have a great day.